Hi, it's Victoria. So in part 2 of my Uterus Didelphys videos, I will talk about my son and how I got pregnant with him and how the pregnancy and delivery went with him. So as I mentioned, I got pregnant with him on our first cycle. We decided to start trying after we'd been married for about a year, keeping in mind that it could take a while, but also not wanting to start trying until we were ready, that if it happened that time, we were ready. So we had that in mind. So I got off the pill. A month later, I hadn't started my period. I really did not think I was pregnant. I figured it was just my body getting used to the hormones. I'd had really irregular cycles before going on the pill, so I really had no idea what my body was gonna do. So after the month had gone by and I hadn't started my period, I took a test and I was blown away, shocked that it was positive. We were all shocked. I told my husband that day and my parents, and we couldn't believe it. We were shocked and thrilled. And as far as the pregnancy went, it was pretty darn perfect. I had very few side effects. I loved being pregnant. I loved the feeling of baby moving. I was just in love with being pregnant. I was pretty comfortable the whole time. My doctor at the end was shocked every time I came in for another appointment because I was really exceeding their expectations by going as long as I did. I did go for ultrasounds monthly from about week 16 on, just to check the length of the cervix and make sure everything was looking good. And I went for an early ultrasound too, just to confirm the pregnancy and date it and find out which side the baby was on. My son, my first pregnancy, was on the left. So he was head down, everything was perfect. Week 37, I was starting to feel really uncomfortable, which is normal even if you don't have two uteruses. And I remember just being able to rest my hand on the top of his bum because he was just so high into my ribs, and which again is totally normal. And just feeling like he just did not have anywhere else to go. So the night before he was born, I went to a hockey game, went back to my parents after, and we had some munchies and just relaxed. And I just said, I don't know, I had this feeling that he was gonna come. So that night I went to bed, woke up about 4 a.m., went to the bathroom, got back in bed, and felt a pop, and my water broke. So I woke my husband up, we went to the hospital. My mom, her water had broken both times, but labor didn't start and she ended up having to be induced. So I was praying that labor would start on its own. It did. Everything was great. Baby looked good. The doctor was encouraging of me to have an epidural because there were some uncertainties as to how delivery would go. I wouldn't say he didn't put any pressure on me. I remember him saying, if you aren't comfortable with it, it's okay. We'll deal with things as they come. But if you do want one, we would be on board with that. So I did want one. There was no question. He didn't have to convince me. So they said, okay, it's your first baby. It was probably about 5 or 6 a.m. at this point. We'll wait for the anesthesiologist for the labor and delivery ward to come on duty, because there's one for the whole hospital and then just one for labor and delivery. And they figured by 8 o'clock when he started, actually I think it was a she, when she started, that I would still be, probably only a few centimeters. Well, 8 o'clock rolls around and my whole body was trying to push. So they actually pushed a C-section, got her to come in, give me my epidural. They said if they didn't really want me to have the epidural, then they would have just said, go ahead and start pushing. But where they really wanted me to have it, they encouraged me to not push, which was so hard. Sitting up, trying not to push while they gave me the epidural. I didn't feel anything. My husband said they tried like 3 times to get the needle in, and I didn't feel anything. My whole body was just bearing down, trying to push, and I had to not push. So that was really hard. After I got the epidural, everything was great. About an hour and a half of pushing, and mosquito again. Baby was born. Perfect. Everything was great. I had quite a bit of tearing. The septum on the inside of the vagina sort of gave way. They said, I remember them using the word dissolved as the baby was coming out. So there was some stitching that I needed internally. So afterwards, the recovery was a little bit slow because I had a lot of swelling and a lot of pain. I was quite weak for the first few days, but generally everything was as close to perfect as it pretty much could be, especially because I had higher risk factors. So I was very fortunate that everything went the way it did. So that was baby number 1. Baby number 2, my daughter, we decided to start trying when our son was probably about 1.5 years, I guess, and it only took 2 cycles this time, which again, I'm so grateful and we're so blessed. So 2 cycles, I got my positive test, started everything out the same way with the OBs and everything. Pregnancy went pretty well. I definitely had a lot more pain. I had some prolapsing issues with the bladder, so I had a lot of like pressure and like a bulge down there, I guess. Sorry, TMI. So that caused me some discomfort, especially when I was standing. Even if I was only standing for like 10 minutes, I would have quite a bit of pressure down there. Walking around was better. Standing still I found really hard. I had a little bit of spotting in the probably late teen weeks. Everything was fine though. It was just a tiny bit. I did go into labor and delivery when I was further along to have that bulge looked at because I didn't know what it was, and I thought maybe it was like the uterus or something, but they said it was the bladder that was like coming down, and that's what was causing the discomfort. Other than that, the pregnancy was pretty good. I was working at the time. I owned an event planning company. We were crazy busy that summer, and I believe, my opinion, is that coupled with it being a summer pregnancy, so very hot, having a toddler. We sold our house in July of that year and moved into my father-in-law's house that was empty, and that's where we lived when the baby was born. So all of those things, we were actually in the process of selling our business. So all of those things combined with my having this uterus didelphys condition, I believe added up to my going into labor at 33 weeks. I was out of town. I had worked at a wedding the day before, all day in the heat, lifting things I knew I shouldn't be lifting. And I was staying at my aunt and uncle's that night. I woke up and I was bleeding. So we went into the hospital. They kept me overnight. I was having contractions. I was about, I think they said 3 to 4 centimeters at that point. They gave me medicine to stop the contractions and steroid shots for the baby's lungs. And I was sent by ambulance the next day to our local hospital and stayed there for, I think, 2 nights. And then I got discharged on bed rest, and I only made it maybe, I think, 2 more days. Yeah, Wednesday to Friday, 2 days, and my water broke again. So back in the hospital, and they told me that I thought everything I had read said that if your water breaks, you have to deliver. But apparently that's not true. They told me when I got in there that if labor didn't start, they would keep monitoring me and make sure that the fluid was good, but they would keep me in the hospital until I was closer to 36 or 37 weeks before I delivered. So I really didn't know what was going to happen, but a few hours after I was admitted, my contractions started. So they kept me on the monitor and they kept checking me to see if the contractions were helping me or making me progress. Baby was breech, so I knew if labor progressed, I would be going for a C-section. So they kept checking. I wasn't really progressing. About 11 o'clock that night, my water had broke at noon. Things had kind of quieted down, so they took me off the monitors, and about an hour later, at about midnight, things started up again. And they decided to take me into labor and delivery and get me prepped. So my daughter was born by C-section at about 3 a.m., 2:52 a.m. Labor had started at about 4 p.m. the day before, so it was about 10 hours of labor to end in a C-section. But they wanted to make sure that the labor was real before taking the baby any earlier than they had to. I was 34 weeks when she was born. And really, she did amazing. She was in the hospital in the NICU for 12 days, but the main things were keeping her temperature up, getting her to wake up and stay awake long enough to eat and gain weight. And those are all the issues that newborns at term have. So really, we were very lucky. She didn't have any breathing problems. She didn't have any jaundice, which is crazy because I think most babies have some jaundice. My son did. So we were really, really fortunate that she did as well as she did. We were able to establish breastfeeding when in the hospital. When she got discharged, she was completely on the breast, and she was tube fed for the first couple of days, and then sort of half and half, tubes and then breast, and then slowly got off the tubes into completely breastfeeding. So things really went well, and my recovery from my C-section was very good. I wouldn't say it was really that much harder than my natural birth because I did have a lot of tearing with that one. So it was probably a little bit longer, but I wouldn't say I felt any worse really. So those are the delivery stories of my 2 babies, and sort of keeping in mind how my having this uterus didelphys condition impacted my labors and deliveries. This time I'm pregnant with baby number 3. I'm hoping baby's in the left because that side seemed to behave much better. We'll see. Hopefully I get in for an early ultrasound and they can tell me. If you have any questions, comments, post them below. And I really hope you enjoyed these videos and hearing a little bit about my birth stories for my 2 babies and about this condition that I have. And I look forward to speaking with you in my next video. Bye.